You know that moment when you realize your entire life has been a lie? When everything you thought was real crumbles in front of your eyes? Well, buckle up, because what I'm about to tell you will make you question everyone around you. My name is Cameron, and 6 months ago I thought I was the luckiest person alive. I had just gotten engaged to the love of my life, Jessica, after 3 years of dating. We had this beautiful relationship, or so I thought. She was everything I had ever wanted. Smart, funny, gorgeous, and she seemed to genuinely care about me. When I proposed to her on the beach during our vacation in Hawaii, she said yes with tears in her eyes, and I felt like I was on top of the world. The engagement party was supposed to be the celebration of our love, the beginning of our journey toward marriage. We had been planning it for months. Jessica insisted on handling most of the details because she said she was better at organizing events than I was. I didn't mind. I was just happy to let her take the lead while I focused on making sure all our family and friends would be there to celebrate with us. We sent out invitations to everyone who mattered to us. My parents, my sister Emma, my best friends from college, Jake, Trevor, and Mason, Jessica's family, her friends from work, and even some mutual friends we had made over the years. It was going to be this beautiful garden party at my parents' house, with fairy lights strung up everywhere and Jessica's favorite flowers decorating every table. The week leading up to the party, I was buzzing with excitement. I couldn't wait to stand in front of everyone and talk about how much Jessica meant to me, how excited we were about our future together. I had even written a speech that I practiced in the mirror every morning. I wanted everything to be perfect. But then, the day of the party arrived, and that's when everything started to go wrong. I woke up that Saturday morning with butterflies in my stomach. Good butterflies, you know, the kind you get when something amazing is about to happen. Jessica had stayed at her apartment the night before because she said she wanted to get ready with her bridesmaids, which made sense. I spent the morning helping my parents set up the backyard, arranging chairs, testing the sound system, and making sure the catering company had everything they needed. By 4 o'clock, everything looked absolutely perfect. The garden was transformed into this magical space with twinkling lights, beautiful flower arrangements, and tables laden with delicious food and drinks. I had put on my best suit, the navy blue one Jessica had helped me pick out, and I was ready to celebrate. The party was supposed to start at 5:30. By 5:45, Jessica still hadn't arrived, and neither had most of our guests. I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. I figured maybe she was running late with her hair and makeup. You know how these things go. 6 o'clock came and went. Still no Jessica, and still hardly any guests. My parents kept looking at me with these concerned expressions, trying to stay positive, but I could see the worry in their eyes. A few of Jessica's co-workers had shown up, and they seemed just as confused as I was about where everyone else could be. Maybe there's traffic, my mom suggested, but we both knew it was a weak excuse. It was a Saturday evening in our small town. There's never traffic. By 6:30, I was starting to panic. I had called Jessica 6 times, and every call went straight to voicemail. I tried calling Jake, my best man, and got the same thing. Trevor, Mason, my sister Emma. Nobody was answering their phones. It was like they had all disappeared off the face of the earth. That's when Mrs. Peterson, Jessica's co-worker, approached me with this weird expression on her face. She looked uncomfortable, like she knew something but didn't want to be the one to tell me. "Cameron," she said quietly, pulling me aside, "I need to ask you something, and please don't take this the wrong way. But is there another event happening today? Something else that Jessica and the others might have gone to?" My heart started racing. "What do you mean another event? This is our engagement party. This is the event." Mrs. Peterson looked even more uncomfortable. "It's just that, well, I was talking to my neighbor this morning and she mentioned seeing Jessica and a bunch of people heading to the Riverside Country Club earlier today. She said it looked like they were dressed for some kind of celebration." The Riverside Country Club. That was on the other side of town, about 20 minutes away. It was this exclusive, expensive place where rich people held their fancy events. Jessica and I had never even been there. It was way out of our budget range. "That doesn't make any sense," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I felt this cold dread settling in my stomach. "Why would they be at the country club?" Mrs. Peterson just shrugged, but I could see the pity in her eyes. She knew something was wrong, just like I was starting to realize. I excused myself and went inside the house, my mind racing. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through social media, looking for any clues about where everyone might be. At first, I didn't find anything, but then I remembered that Jessica's younger sister, Madison, was always posting on Instagram, and she wasn't the type to think before she posted. I went to Madison's profile, and there it was, a story posted just an hour ago. The location tag said Riverside Country Club, and the photo showed Madison in a beautiful dress, holding a champagne flute, with the caption, "Such a beautiful day for a celebration." My hands were shaking as I tapped through more of her stories. There were more photos. The country club's elegant ballroom, tables covered in white linens and gold centerpieces, and then I saw it. A photo of Jessica. My fiancée, Jessica, in a stunning white dress I had never seen before, laughing and raising a glass of champagne. She looked radiant, happy, like she was having the time of her life. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was who she was standing next to. Derek Whitmore, Jessica's ex-boyfriend from college. The guy she had dated for 2 years before we got together. The guy she always claimed meant nothing to her, that their relationship had ended badly and they never spoke anymore. But there they were, standing incredibly close together, Jessica's hand resting on Derek's chest, both of them beaming at the camera like they didn't have a care in the world. I felt like I was going to be sick. I kept scrolling through Madison's stories, and each photo was worse than the last. There was Jake, my best man, toasting with Derek. There was my sister Emma, laughing at something Derek was saying. There were Trevor and Mason, the guys who were supposed to be my groomsmen, playing pool in what looked like the country club's game room. Everyone was there. Everyone who was supposed to be at my engagement party was at the Riverside Country Club, celebrating with Jessica and Derek. But celebrating what? I ran back outside to where my parents were still trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy with the few guests who had actually shown up. "Mom, Dad, I need to borrow your car," I said, probably looking as frantic as I felt. "Cameron, what's wrong?" my dad asked, but I was already heading toward their car. "I'll explain later. I need to go somewhere." The drive to the Riverside Country Club felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. My mind was racing with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Maybe it was some kind of surprise for me. Maybe they were all planning to come back to our party after whatever this was. But deep down, I knew I was just trying to convince myself of something that wasn't true. When I pulled into the country club's parking lot, I immediately recognized several cars. Jake's red pickup truck, Emma's silver sedan, and even Jessica's blue Honda. They were all here. They had all chosen to be here instead of at my engagement party. I sat in the car for a moment, trying to gather the courage to go inside. Part of me wanted to just drive home and pretend this wasn't happening, but I needed to know the truth. The country club was intimidating even from the outside, all marble columns and perfectly manicured gardens. I had never felt more out of place as I walked up to the entrance in my navy suit, which suddenly felt cheap and ill-fitting. The lobby was elegant and imposing, with crystal chandeliers and expensive-looking artwork on the walls. A woman in a crisp uniform was standing behind the reception desk, and she looked at me with the kind of polite smile that rich people pay for. "Good evening, sir. Are you here for an event?" "Yes," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm looking for a party, a celebration. I think my friends are here." She consulted her computer. "We have the Whitmore celebration in the Aurora Ballroom this evening. Are you with that party?" The Whitmore celebration. Derek's last name was Whitmore. "Yes," I lied. "I'm a little late." She gave me directions to the ballroom, and I walked through the country club's opulent halls with my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear music and laughter coming from ahead, and as I got closer, I recognized the voices. These were the people who were supposed to be celebrating my engagement. Instead, they were here, celebrating something else entirely. I paused outside the ballroom doors, trying to work up the nerve to go inside. Through the glass panels, I could see the party in full swing. It looked like something out of a movie. Elegant, expensive, beautiful. And there, in the center of it all, was Jessica. But she wasn't wearing her engagement ring. Instead, she was wearing a different ring. A bigger, more expensive-looking ring on her left hand. And Derek was right beside her, his arm around her waist, looking like the proudest man in the world. That's when I understood. This wasn't just some random party. This was an engagement party. Derek and Jessica's engagement party. I pushed open the ballroom doors and stepped inside, and the first person to see me was Jake. The look on his face was pure terror, like he had seen a ghost. He immediately started walking toward me, his hands raised like he was trying to calm down a wild animal. "Cameron," he said quietly, "what are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" I repeated, my voice getting louder. The music was still playing, but I could see people starting to turn around and look at us. "What are you doing here, Jake? You're supposed to be my best man. You're supposed to be at my engagement party right now." The entire ballroom fell silent. Jessica turned around, and when she saw me, the color drained from her face. Derek looked confused, like he had no idea who I was or why everyone had suddenly stopped talking. "Cameron," Jessica said, her voice shaking. "I can explain." "Explain what exactly?" I asked, walking further into the room. I could see my sister Emma trying to hide behind a pillar, and Trevor and Mason looking like they wanted to disappear into the floor. "Explain why everyone who was supposed to be celebrating our engagement is here celebrating your engagement to someone else." Derek stepped forward then, and I could see the recognition dawning on his face. "Wait," he said. "You're Cameron? The guy Jessica was engaged to?" "Was engaged to." Past tense. "Actually," Jessica said, her voice getting stronger, "we need to talk about that." And that's when she told me the truth. The awful, devastating truth that shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. Jessica had never stopped loving Derek. They had reconnected on social media about 6 months ago, right around the time she and I got engaged. At first it was just innocent messages catching up on old times. But then Derek told her that he had made a huge mistake letting her go, that he had spent the last 3 years regretting their breakup, and that he wanted her back. Jessica realized that she had only gotten engaged to me because she thought Derek was out of her life forever. But now that he was back, and now that he was successful and wealthy, he had started his own tech company and was worth millions. She knew she had to make a choice, and she chose him. The worst part? She had been planning to break up with me for weeks, but she didn't know how to do it without looking like the bad guy. So when Derek proposed to her last week during a romantic weekend getaway that I didn't even know about, she said yes. They decided to have their engagement party on the same day as ours, and they invited all of our mutual friends and family members, basically forcing them to choose between us, and they all chose her. "Everyone knows Derek is the better choice for me," Jessica said, not even trying to be gentle about it. "He can give me the life I've always dreamed of. You're sweet, Cameron, but you're never going to be able to provide for me the way Derek can. This is better for everyone." I looked around the room at all the people who were supposed to care about me. My best friends, who had known me since college. My sister, who I'd always been close to. Jessica's family, who had welcomed me with open arms and made me feel like I was already part of their family. They were all looking at me with varying degrees of guilt and pity, but not one of them spoke up to defend me. Not one of them said that what Jessica had done was wrong, or that they should have at least told me what was happening. "How long have you all known about this?" I asked. Jake was the first to answer. "She told us 2 weeks ago," he said quietly. "She swore us to secrecy. She said she would handle telling you herself." 2 weeks. They had all known for 2 weeks that Jessica was going to dump me and get engaged to someone else, and not one of them had given me a heads up. They had let me continue planning our engagement party, let me write a speech about how much I loved her, let me believe that I was about to marry the woman of my dreams. "I think you should leave," Derek said, and there was something in his tone that made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. I looked at Jessica one more time, hoping to see some trace of the woman I had fallen in love with, some hint of remorse or regret, but she just looked at me with cold eyes, like I was a problem that had finally been solved. So I left. I walked out of that ballroom, through the elegant hallways, past the crystal chandeliers and expensive artwork, and back to my parents' car. I sat there for a few minutes trying to process what had just happened, trying to figure out how my life had completely fallen apart in the span of a few hours. When I got back to my house, the catering staff was cleaning up the untouched food, and my parents were taking down the decorations we had spent all morning putting up. The few guests who had shown up had gone home, probably wondering what kind of disaster they had witnessed. "How did it go?" my mom asked gently, even though she could probably tell from my face that it hadn't gone well. I told them everything, about Jessica and Derek, about the engagement party at the country club, about how everyone we trusted had betrayed us. My parents were shocked and furious, but they were also hurt. They had genuinely liked Jessica and had been looking forward to having her as a daughter-in-law. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do next. Jessica hadn't even officially broken up with me. She had just announced to a room full of people that she was engaged to someone else. I still had her belongings at my apartment. We still had wedding vendors to cancel, and I had no idea how to explain to people what had happened. But more than that, I felt completely humiliated. Everyone I cared about had chosen Jessica and Derek over me. My best friends, my sister, people who had known me for years, they had all decided that I wasn't worth their loyalty. The next few weeks were brutal. Jessica finally came by my apartment to get her things and to officially end our engagement, but she acted like she was doing me a favor. She told me that I should be grateful that she had been honest about her feelings instead of marrying me and being miserable. She said that Derek was her soulmate, and that I would understand someday when I found mine. She left her engagement ring on my kitchen counter like it was trash. Jake tried to call me a few times to apologize, but I didn't answer. What was there to say? He had chosen to keep Jessica's secret instead of being loyal to his best friend. Trevor and Mason sent me some half-hearted text messages, but it was clear they just felt guilty and wanted to absolve themselves of responsibility. The worst betrayal was my sister Emma. When she finally came by the house to see me, she actually tried to justify what she had done. "Cameron, you have to understand," she said. "Jessica was in an impossible situation. She didn't want to hurt you, but she couldn't live a lie either. And Derek really is a better match for her. They have more in common, and he can give her the lifestyle she wants." "So you think she handled this the right way?" I asked. "You think it was okay for her to get engaged to someone else while she was still engaged to me? You think it was okay for all of you to lie to me for 2 weeks? Emma looked uncomfortable. "It wasn't ideal, but nothing," I interrupted. "You're my sister, Emma. You're supposed to have my back no matter what. Instead, you chose to protect someone who was cheating on me emotionally and lying to me every single day." "It wasn't cheating," Emma protested. "She didn't sleep with Derek while she was with you. She got engaged to him while she was engaged to me," I shouted. "How is that not cheating?" Emma left that day, and we didn't speak for weeks. I fell into a pretty dark place after that. I took time off work because I couldn't concentrate on anything. I stopped leaving my apartment except to buy groceries. I deleted all my social media accounts because I couldn't stand seeing photos of Jessica and Derek's perfect new life together. But after about a month of wallowing in self-pity, something changed. I was going through my emails, deleting all the wedding-related messages I had never gotten around to canceling, when I came across something interesting. It was an email from the photographer we had hired for our engagement party. She had sent it the day after the party, apologizing for not being able to make it due to a family emergency. But at the bottom of the email, she mentioned something that caught my attention. "I hope you were able to find another photographer for your party," she wrote. "I saw on Instagram that there was another celebration at the Riverside Country Club that same day. What a coincidence. I'm sure your friends had a great time wherever you ended up celebrating." I stared at that email for a long time, and something clicked in my brain. The photographer had noticed that there was another party on the same day as ours. She had made the connection that our friends were at a different celebration, which meant that other people had probably noticed too. I created a new Instagram account under a fake name and started doing some digging. It didn't take long to find photos from Derek and Jessica's engagement party. Madison had posted dozens of them, tagging everyone who had been there. But as I scrolled through the photos and read the comments, I started noticing something interesting. A lot of people seemed confused about the timeline. There were comments like, "Wait, weren't you just at another engagement party?" And, "I thought Jessica was engaged to someone else." It became clear that Jessica and Derek hadn't been as smooth about their deception as they thought. People had noticed that something was off, and there were starting to be whispers about what had really happened. That gave me an idea. I started reaching out to people who hadn't been at either party, mutual acquaintances, co-workers, people from our extended social circle. I didn't trash-talk Jessica or try to make her look bad. I simply told them the truth about what had happened, how I had shown up to my own engagement party to find it empty, because everyone had chosen to go to Jessica's engagement party with her ex-boyfriend instead. The response was incredible. People were shocked and outraged. They couldn't believe that Jessica had handled the situation so cruelly, or that our mutual friends had gone along with it. Several people told me they had always thought there was something off about Jessica, but they hadn't wanted to say anything while we were together. Word started to spread. Jessica's co-workers at the marketing firm where she worked began to hear the story. Derek's business associates started asking questions about why he had proposed to someone who was already engaged to someone else. People in our social circle began to take sides, and it wasn't going the way Jessica had expected. But I wasn't done yet. Remember how Jessica had always claimed that her relationship with Derek had ended badly and that they never spoke anymore? Well, I decided to do a little investigating into that claim. I reached out to some people who had known both Jessica and Derek during their college years. What I discovered was very different from the story Jessica had always told me. According to their mutual friends from college, Jessica and Derek's relationship had ended because Derek had cheated on her with her roommate. It had been a huge scandal at the time, and Jessica had been devastated. She had sworn she would never speak to Derek again. But more interesting was what had happened in the years since then. Several people told me that Jessica and Derek had actually been in contact much more recently than Jessica had admitted. They had been seen together at alumni events. They had been texting regularly, and there had been rumors that Jessica had been trying to get back together with Derek for over a year, which meant that Jessica hadn't suddenly reconnected with Derek 6 months ago like she had claimed. She had been pursuing him for much longer than that, possibly even before Derek and I got engaged. Armed with this new information, I decided to have a conversation with someone who I thought might be able to help me get to the bottom of things. Derek's younger brother, Austin. Austin had always been the black sheep of the Whitmore family. He was Derek's opposite in every way. Where Derek was polished and successful, Austin was artsy and rebellious. He worked as a freelance graphic designer and had never gotten along well with his brother. I found Austin at a coffee shop in the downtown arts district, and I bought him a cup of coffee in exchange for some honest conversation about his brother and Jessica. "Look," Austin said after I explained the situation, "I'm not surprised by any of this. Derek has always been a narcissist who takes whatever he wants without caring about who gets hurt. And Jessica, well, she's always been obsessed with money and status. Austin told me that Derek had actually been bragging about stealing Jessica away from me for months. He had seen it as some kind of game or challenge. Derek had always resented that Jessica had moved on after their college breakup, and when he found out she was engaged to someone else, he decided he wanted her back just to prove that he could have her. The worst part," Austin said, "is that Derek doesn't even really love Jessica. He just wanted to win. He wanted to prove that he could take her away from you because he's richer and more successful. It's all about his ego." Austin also told me something that made my blood boil. Apparently, Derek had been planning to propose to Jessica for weeks before he actually did it, but he had wanted to wait until after my engagement party to make the announcement. He thought it would be more dramatic and humiliating for me that way. The engagement party at the country club hadn't been a spur-of-the-moment decision. It had been carefully planned to coincide with ours, and Derek had specifically instructed Jessica to invite all of our mutual friends so that I would be left alone and humiliated. It had all been deliberate. The cruelty, the timing, the public humiliation, it had all been part of Derek's plan to destroy me as completely as possible. But Austin wasn't done. He told me something else that gave me the perfect opportunity for revenge. "Derek's been having some problems with his business lately," Austin said. "Nothing too serious yet, but he's been cutting corners and making some questionable decisions to maintain his lifestyle and pay for all the expensive gestures he's been making to impress Jessica. If someone were to look closely at his company's finances and business practices, they might find some interesting things." Austin explained that Derek's tech company had been struggling for the past year, despite Derek's claims of success. He had been lying to investors about the company's growth prospects, and he had been using business funds for personal expenses, including the expensive ring he had bought Jessica and the lavish engagement party at the country club. He's basically been living off investor money while his company slowly goes bankrupt, Austin said. But he's been hiding it from everyone, including Jessica. She has no idea that her rich fiancé is actually broke and potentially facing legal problems. This was exactly the kind of information I needed. I spent the next few weeks quietly gathering evidence about Derek's business practices. Austin helped by providing me with some internal documents he had access to through his family connections. I also reached out to a friend of mine from college who had become a financial journalist, and she helped me understand what Derek's financial records really meant. What we discovered was even worse than Austin had suggested. Derek hadn't just been using investor money for personal expenses. He had been running what was essentially a Ponzi scheme, using money from new investors to pay returns to earlier investors, while using a significant portion of the funds for his own lavish lifestyle. His company was not only bankrupt, but Derek was likely facing serious legal consequences once the truth came out. He had been desperately trying to find new investors to keep the scheme going, but he was running out of options. I realized that Derek's rush to marry Jessica wasn't just about ego. He was probably hoping that her stable job and clean reputation would help him rebuild his credibility and attract new investors. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I compiled all the evidence I had gathered into a comprehensive report, and then I did something that I knew would destroy Derek's life completely. I sent copies of the report to every investor in his company, every business associate he worked with, and several financial journalists who specialized in exposing corporate fraud. I also sent a copy to Jessica. The fallout was swift and devastating. Within 48 hours, Derek's investors had frozen his company's accounts and launched their own investigation. The state attorney general's office opened a criminal investigation into Derek's business practices. Several news outlets picked up the story, and Derek's company became the subject of multiple articles about startup fraud and investor scams. Derek was finished. Not only was his company destroyed, but he was facing potential criminal charges for fraud, embezzlement, and securities violations. His assets were frozen, and he had to hire expensive lawyers to defend himself against both civil and criminal charges. But the best part was Jessica's reaction. She called me the day after the news broke, absolutely hysterical. "Cameron, what did you do?" she screamed into the phone. "Derek's entire life is falling apart. The wedding is off, he can't even pay his rent, and everyone is saying he might go to prison." "I didn't do anything," I said calmly. "I just shared some publicly available information about Derek's business practices with people who had a right to know. If Derek is facing consequences, it's because of his own actions, not mine." "But you ruined everything," Jessica cried. "We were supposed to be happy together." "Were you?" I asked. "Were you really happy with Derek? Or were you just happy with his money and status? Because from what I understand, both of those things were based on lies." Jessica was quiet for a moment, and then she said something that showed me exactly who she really was. "This is all your fault," she said. "If you had just accepted that our relationship was over and moved on, none of this would have happened. You couldn't stand seeing me happy with someone better than you, so you destroyed my life out of spite." I hung up on her. Over the next few weeks, I watched as Jessica's perfect new life completely unraveled. Derek was arrested and charged with multiple felonies. His assets were seized to compensate his victims. The country club membership was revoked, the expensive apartment was foreclosed on, and the lavish lifestyle that had attracted Jessica in the first place disappeared overnight. Jessica tried to go back to her old life, but she quickly discovered that burning bridges has consequences. Most of our mutual friends felt guilty about how they had treated me, and they weren't eager to welcome Jessica back into their social circle. Her co-workers at the marketing firm had heard about her role in the whole situation and had lost respect for her professional judgment. Even my sister Emma, who had initially defended Jessica's actions, called to apologize. "I was wrong, Cameron," she said. "What Jessica did to you was cruel and inexcusable. I should have supported you instead of making excuses for her behavior. I'm sorry." Jake, Trevor, and Mason also reached out to apologize, though it took me a while to forgive them. They had to work to rebuild my trust, and our friendships were never quite the same, but at least they were willing to admit they had made a mistake. As for Jessica, she ended up leaving town about 3 months after Derek's arrest. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had taken a job in another state and was trying to start over somewhere where people didn't know her story. Derek was eventually sentenced to 5 years in prison for fraud and embezzlement. The judge made specific mention of how Derek's crimes had been motivated by his desire to maintain a lavish lifestyle to impress others, which only made the whole situation more satisfying. But you know what the best part of this whole story is? About 6 months after everything fell apart for Jessica and Derek, I got a message on social media from someone I had never met before. Her name was Rachel, and she had heard about my story through a mutual friend. She said she had gone through something similar. Her fiancé had left her for his ex-girlfriend right before their wedding, and she wanted to let me know that she admired how I had handled the situation. We started talking, and I quickly realized that Rachel was everything Jessica wasn't. She was genuine, kind, loyal, and she valued character over wealth. She had been hurt by her ex-fiancé's betrayal, but instead of becoming bitter or vengeful, she had used the experience to become stronger and more compassionate. We started dating about a year after my engagement to Jessica ended, and now we've been together for almost 2 years. Rachel and I are engaged now, and this time I know I'm marrying someone who truly loves me for who I am, not what I can provide for her. Our engagement party was last month, and it was everything that my party with Jessica should have been. All of our friends and family were there, genuinely happy to celebrate our love. There was no drama, no hidden agendas, no one plotting behind our backs. Just pure joy and celebration. Jake was my best man again. We had worked through our issues, and he had proven his loyalty in the years since the Jessica situation. Emma was there with her new boyfriend, and she gave a beautiful speech about how proud she was of the man I had become. Even my parents, who had been hurt by Jessica's betrayal, were beaming with happiness. But you know what made the whole thing even more perfect? 3 days before our engagement party, I got a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, it was from Jessica. "Congratulations on your engagement," the message said. "I saw the announcement on social media. She seems lovely. I hope you'll be very happy together." I showed the message to Rachel and we both just laughed. It was such a transparent attempt to insert herself back into my life, probably because she was lonely and regretted the choices she had made. But I didn't respond. I had moved on completely, and Jessica was just a reminder of a dark chapter in my life that was now closed. Later that week, I heard from Austin that Jessica had tried to reach out to Derek in prison, probably hoping to rekindle their relationship now that she was alone. But Derek, apparently, had no interest in talking to her. He blamed Jessica for his legal troubles, claiming that if she hadn't been so demanding about expensive gestures and a lavish lifestyle, he wouldn't have felt pressured to commit fraud. It was the perfect ending to their toxic relationship. Two selfish people who had betrayed everyone around them, now turning on each other and ending up alone. Meanwhile, Rachel and I are planning a beautiful wedding for next spring. We're having it at a small venue that means something to both of us, with a guest list full of people who genuinely care about our happiness. We're not trying to impress anyone or prove anything to the world. We're just celebrating the love we found together. Do you know what? I'm grateful that Jessica betrayed me the way she did. If she had gone through with our marriage, I would have spent years with someone who didn't really love me, someone who was just settling for me until something better came along. Instead, her betrayal freed me to find someone who loves me unconditionally. Rachel knows the whole story about Jessica and Derek, and she's never once made me feel like I was damaged goods or that she was settling for someone's leftovers. She sees my experience as proof of my character, that I was loyal and committed even when my partner wasn't, and that I was strong enough to rebuild my life after everything fell apart. The revenge I got on Derek wasn't just about exposing his crimes, though that was satisfying. The real revenge was building a better life without him and Jessica in it. The real revenge was finding genuine happiness with someone who deserves my love. Sometimes people ask me if I regret exposing Derek's business fraud. They suggest that maybe I went too far, that maybe I should have just moved on and let karma handle things naturally. But here's the thing, I don't regret it for a second. Derek wasn't just a guy who stole my fiancée. He was a criminal who was defrauding innocent investors out of their life savings. Some of those investors were elderly people who had trusted Derek with their retirement funds. Others were young entrepreneurs who had worked for years to save up enough money to invest in what they thought was a legitimate business opportunity. Derek was destroying lives long before he destroyed mine. The only difference was that I was in a position to do something about it, and I had the motivation to dig deep enough to uncover the truth. If I hadn't exposed Derek's crimes, he would have continued stealing from people until his scheme eventually collapsed on its own, which it inevitably would have. But by then, he would have stolen millions more dollars from innocent victims, and the damage would have been far worse. So, no, I don't feel guilty about what I did to Derek. I feel proud that I was able to stop a criminal and help his victims get at least some of their money back. As for Jessica, she made her choices. She chose money and status over love and loyalty. She chose to humiliate me in the most public and cruel way possible. She chose to turn my friends and family against me. And when her perfect new life fell apart, she chose to blame me instead of taking responsibility for her own actions. I didn't ruin Jessica's life. I just revealed the truth about the man she had chosen over me. If she had really loved Derek for who he was rather than what he could give her, his financial problems wouldn't have mattered to her. The fact that she immediately bailed on him the moment his money disappeared just proved that I had been right about her character all along. But you know what the most satisfying part of this whole story is? It's not that Derek went to prison, or that Jessica ended up alone, or that everyone who betrayed me eventually apologized. The most satisfying part is that I learned something about myself that I might never have discovered otherwise. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was. I learned that I can survive betrayal and heartbreak and come out better on the other side. I learned that I don't need people in my life who don't value loyalty and honesty. And most importantly, I learned what real love looks like. When Rachel and I got engaged, she didn't care about having the most expensive ring or the most elaborate proposal. She cared about the fact that I had chosen her and that we were choosing to build a life together based on mutual respect and genuine affection. When we planned our engagement party, Rachel's priority wasn't impressing people or showing off. Her priority was celebrating our love with the people who mattered most to us. She wanted our friends and family to see how happy we were together, not how much money we could spend on decorations and catering. That's the difference between real love and whatever it was that Jessica and I had. Real love isn't about what someone can do for you, or how they can improve your social status. Real love is about finding someone who sees the best in you and chooses to be with you even when things get difficult. Jessica never really loved me. She loved the idea of being engaged, and she loved the security of having a devoted boyfriend, but she never loved me as a person. The moment someone better came along, someone with more money and higher status, she was ready to throw away everything we had built together. Derek never really loved Jessica either. He just wanted to prove that he could take her away from me. Once he had won that game, he probably would have gotten bored with her eventually and moved on to his next conquest. The fact that he blamed her for his legal troubles and refused to talk to her in prison just proved that he had never really cared about her as a person. They deserved each other, and they deserved the misery they ended up with. Meanwhile, Rachel and I are building something real. We've been through challenges together. I was still dealing with the emotional aftermath of Jessica's betrayal when we first started dating, and Rachel was working through her own trust issues from her previous relationship. But instead of running away when things got difficult, we supported each other and grew stronger together. We've seen each other at our worst, and we've chosen to love each other anyway. That's what real love looks like. Last month, we went to look at wedding venues, and one of the places we visited was actually the Riverside Country Club, where Derek and Jessica had their engagement party. The event coordinator didn't remember me, but she remembered their party because it had been such a disaster. "Oh, that was the couple where the groom got arrested a few weeks later," she said. "Such a shame. They had seemed so happy at their party, but I guess you never really know what's going on behind the scenes." Rachel and I looked at each other and tried not to laugh. We decided not to book our wedding there, not because of the bad memories, but because the place was way too pretentious for our taste. We ended up choosing a beautiful garden venue that reminded us of my parents' backyard, where we had originally planned to have my engagement party with Jessica. It felt like everything had come full circle, but this time, it was right. I think about that night sometimes, the night I stood in my parents' backyard in my navy suit, waiting for guests who would never come, trying to figure out where everyone was. At the time, it felt like the worst moment of my life. I felt humiliated, abandoned, and completely lost. But now I realize that it was actually one of the best things that ever happened to me. If Jessica hadn't betrayed me that night, I would have married her. I would have spent years with someone who didn't really love me, someone who was always looking for something better. I would have wasted the best years of my life on a relationship that was built on lies and false promises. Instead, her betrayal freed me to find Rachel, who loves me for exactly who I am. Her betrayal taught me to recognize the difference between real loyalty and fake friendship. Her betrayal showed me that I'm strong enough to survive anything life throws at me. The engagement party that never happened turned out to be a blessing in disguise. And Derek's downfall? That was just the cherry on top. Justice served with a side of poetic irony. You know what I did with Jessica's engagement ring? The one she left on my kitchen counter like it was trash? I sold it and used the money to buy Rachel's engagement ring. It seemed like the perfect way to turn something that represented betrayal and heartbreak into something that represents love and hope. Rachel doesn't know that story yet. I'm planning to tell her on our wedding day, when we're exchanging vows in front of all the people who truly love and support us. I think she'll find it as poetic as I do. In the end, the best revenge isn't destruction or humiliation. The best revenge is building a life so much better than what you had before, that you're grateful for the betrayal that made it possible. Jessica thought she was trading up when she chose Derek over me. She thought she was getting a better life, more money, higher status, and a more successful partner. Instead, she ended up alone, unemployed, and starting over in a new city where nobody knows her name. I thought I was losing everything when Jessica left me. I thought I was losing the love of my life, my future, and my chance at happiness. Instead, I was gaining the opportunity to find real love, real friendship, and real success on my own terms. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that ever happened to you. You just have to be patient enough to let the story play out. 3 years later, I can honestly say that I'm grateful for every single thing that happened that night. I'm grateful that Jessica showed her true colors before we got married. I'm grateful that my so-called friends revealed their lack of loyalty while I was still young enough to find better friends. I'm grateful that Derek's crimes were exposed before he could hurt more innocent people. And most of all, I'm grateful that I had the strength to fight back instead of just accepting defeat. The boy who stood in that empty backyard 3 years ago, wondering where everyone had gone, would never have imagined that the man he would become would be stronger, happier, and more successful than he had ever dreamed possible. But that's the thing about rock bottom. It gives you a solid foundation to build something amazing. Rachel and I are getting married in 6 months, and this time, I know everyone who RSVPs will actually show up. Not because they're afraid of missing out on something better, but because they genuinely want to celebrate our happiness. This time, I'm not just getting married. I'm building a life with someone who chose me when she could have chosen anyone. Someone who sees my scars as proof of my strength rather than evidence of my weakness. This time, it's going to be perfect. Not because everything will go according to plan, but because it will be real. And Jessica? Well, I heard she's dating someone new. A divorced accountant who lives in a modest apartment and drives a 10-year-old car. Apparently, she's learned to value stability over status, though I suspect that has more to do with her limited options than any real personal growth. Either way, it doesn't matter to me. Jessica is part of my past, and my past is what made my present possible. I hope she finds happiness eventually, but more importantly, I hope she learns to be the kind of person who deserves it. As for Derek, he still has 2 years left on his prison sentence. I don't think about him much anymore, but when I do, I remember something Austin told me. Derek always thought he was the smartest person in the room. Turns out, sometimes the quiet guy in the corner is the one you should be worried about. I wasn't trying to be the smartest person in the room that night at the country club. I was just trying to understand why the people I trusted had betrayed me. But in seeking the truth, I uncovered a much bigger truth than I had been looking for. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to let someone's betrayal define your story. Sometimes the best revenge is building something so beautiful out of the ashes that people forget there was ever a fire. But sometimes, just sometimes, the best revenge is making sure that justice is served and that the truth comes to light. I got all three. If you enjoyed this revenge story, smash that like button. Drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in this situation. Subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss when I upload new content.